Kate McElwee is the Executive Director of Women's Ordination Conference, where she's worked since 2011. She represents them on women's ordination worldwide, and she's a member of the leadership circle there. Lately, she's been based in Rome, where she has got up to all sorts of mischief to further the cause of women's ordination, in some of which I'm proud to have played a small part. I think we worked out, I've known Kate about 8 years, and have many happy memories of campaigning with her and celebrating afterwards. So I'm thinking of the Jubilee for Women Priests in Rome in 2016, where there were many, many things happening then. Beautiful posters of the women called were put up in prominent positions around the city. We held an event with a panel of speakers for the press, giving them Prosecco-based cocktails called Feminine Genius and Strawberries on the Cake, to quote Pope Francis and his description of women. We demonstrated near the Vatican to demand the door to priesthood is open to women. We had a pink phone box covered in such witty slogans as, "You keep me hanging on," "Dial down misogyny," "I just called to say ordain me," and one which seems more appropriate to Zoom calling, 22 years on mute. The door of the phone box was open. Will the door to priesthood ever be open to women? We then attended a mass in St. Peter's Square, and we'd somehow blagged tickets for an area definitely not reserved for the likes of us, and we held our own Eucharist. A couple of years later, we prayed and chanted outside the synod where hardly any women were present and none had a vote. The police went into overdrive and Kate was horribly treated that day. She stood her ground though, and the campaign goes on. She was also part of the Pink Smoke campaign when the last Pope was chosen. And now some say she installed a huge banner saying ordain women in the heart of the Vatican, though it might have been erected miraculously, and I certainly don't want to incriminate her. Also, of course, before she moved to Rome, if you Google "Ordain a Lady" music video, you will find Kate and her friends singing this amusing but heartfelt song, lines from which are, "Hey, I was baptized and this is crazy, but God has called me, so ordain a lady." Kate is the go-to person if you're writing about fighting the sin of sexism. Just yesterday, she's quoted in the New York Times on the Pope's latest pronouncement about female altar servers. She says, "The decree in itself is not a radical shift, but the Church recognizing widely accepted practices by Catholics around the world and taking the steps to be more inclusive is a radical thing. In communities that use church practice as a way to discriminate or defend oppressive practices in society, this could be a step, albeit small, towards greater equality for women." I feel really privileged to have worked with this amazing woman and to count her as a friend. So I'm very happy to introduce Kate McElwee to you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pat. That was really sweet. And we've shared so many years and actions yeah, it's an honor to be your friend, and it's also an honor to be with all of you today. I'm scrolling through the screen before I share my slides so that I can see all your faces and say hi. I know some of you, but not all of you. So I was telling Mary before that this is really an extraordinary thing that you're doing. Creating this sacred space is radical, and journeying together on this discernment process is just incredible. So I'm very honored to be part of your discernment process and this synodal path that you're on together. And I hope that what I share with you today is a little bit of the piece of me and a little bit of piece of the Women's Ordination Conference, which is an organization that I have worked for almost 10 years now. And so I have a short presentation, and I thought I'd share a little bit about how I came to this movement and what inspires me to continue. And then I have a lot of questions that I get asked that I thought I maybe would share some frequently asked questions. And then I really would love to be in dialogue with all of you. This is a miraculous image that Pat maybe mentioned before. And I've come clean with this banner drop here on the bridge leading up to the Castel Sant'Angelo, right at the beginning of the Via della Conciliazione in Rome. So I constructed this banner here by collecting fabric around Rome and painted it on my terrace. And I constructed I took broomsticks and rope and tapped them on either end, which I really love the symbolism of that. I thought Mary Daly would be so proud of my witchcraft here. And I had one friend who helped me commit a crime by dropping the banner over the bridge and affixing it to the structure, which is actually defacing a landmark within Rome. So we had lots of contingency plans about this action. We would drop it in the river if police came, or we'd run away. But luckily we were able to put this up and keep it up for quite a while. And then about an hour later, I heard from a journalist who was on a jog and saw those brand new broomsticks being taken down by police. So this is an image that you'll find on the Women's Ordination Conference homepage. And it's just, what I love about it is it shows this huge institution and then this tiny voice that's the ministry of irritation right there, not letting them get away with it. So as Pat and Rihanna mentioned, we just celebrated our 45th anniversary as the Women's Ordination Conference. And this is probably familiar to all of you, but our mission is to advocate and pray for women's ordination as deacons, priests, and bishops into an inclusive and accountable Roman Catholic Church. We are a feminist voice for women in the church, and I love that we are a grassroots-driven movement that promotes activism, dialogue, and prayerful witness to call for women's full equality in the church. I think it's really important to kind of expand our mission to include the vision and values that we hold true, because while our mission is to open all ministries to women in the church, I think our vision and our values really kind of explain the ways that we approach that and the values that we hold as we lobby for that welcoming to the table. Particularly, I want to mention that we are a grassroots organization. So we believe that change will come from empowered Catholics on the local level. We also believe that people should have the opportunity to make decisions that impact their lives. We're informed by feminist, mujerista, and womanist thought and action. And we're a social justice organization. So we practice nonviolence. And we believe that our public witness and demonstrations should be prayerful, yet poignant. So for me, this is really how we're an intersectional organization. And you'll see in our vision as well that we also recognize all ministries that meet the spiritual needs of the people of God. So this is our way of acknowledging and celebrating the fact that some people are not waiting for ordination in the church, and we respect that, we love that, we honor that, and that is part of our vision as well. We don't believe that ordination is the only way for women to be equal in the church, and that there can be ministries that meet the different needs of the people of God. So for me, the values are very important to our work as an organization that still uncompromisingly advocates for women's ordination. So this is a little bit of my backstory. So you've heard a little bit of the backstory of the Women's Ordination Conference. So I was raised Catholic in upstate New York. My parents went to Catholic schools and Jesuit universities, and I was confirmed. I kind of had an agreement with my parents that after confirmation, I could do whatever I wanted, and I did. So I'm guilty of taking one of those classes at university that changes your life. And for me, that was Buddhist ethics. So my first semester, Calc 2 didn't fit into my schedule. And so I ended up taking a Buddhist ethics course. And I fell in love. And this was where I kind of pursued all of my academic studies and studying religion. I focused in Tibetan Buddhism. So I went to India, I learned Tibetan. I met the Dalai Lama more than once. I like to have a little flex here that we're actually holding hands in that photo there. I received a certificate in Buddhist studies. And what captivated me about Buddhism was this sense of engaged spirituality. So engaged Buddhism is like getting off of the cushion and going out into the world. And for me, that, it took me to organizations like the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, where I did an internship in Berkeley, California. I got a master's degree at SOAS in London, studying the question of universal jurisdiction in Tibet. I had an internship at Harvard's Pluralism Project that investigated the religious diversity of the United States, and I was Team Buddhism all the way. But something that kind of crept up over and over again as I served on multi-faith councils or interfaith networks. I was usually the Buddhist representative, which you might find funny now, but it took me a while to realize that I was always talking about my cultural heritage as a Catholic. You can study a religion in kind of your liberal arts bubble at a women's college in Western Massachusetts, but when I went to India, I actually did recognize something called patriarchy within the system. My colleagues and my classmates and I encountered predatory monks. I was really concerned about the difference in the number of vows that Buddhist nuns had to take versus Buddhist monks, because they were considered maybe too deviant or less strong-willed and needed more regulations. And so I kind of stored all of these thoughts, and it was concerning to me. And so that was my junior year in college. And when I returned to school, I continued studying Buddhism, but also started reinvestigating my Catholicism through feminist theology. And one of the kind of awakening moments in my studies was when Mary Hunt came to visit my feminist theology course. And I asked her the question that, I am so tired of answering myself now, but I asked her, why do you stay in the church? And her reply is a compass that I return to over and over again for guidance. She said, we have a responsibility to speak this language. This is what a Catholic looks like. And to me, that's so important because, as I was trying to represent Buddhism in different circles, my cultural heritage and my spiritual home is actually in the Catholic Church. And it took me, several years after graduating to come back to that. And I sort of came back to it through the very back door of the church, through the Women's Ordination Conference. Her words are something that I always go back to now. And so in 2011, I got a job with the Women's Ordination Conference as the membership coordinator, and I moved to Washington, D.C. And I consider that my sort of re-education into the Catholic Church. And so again, my parents are very supportive. When I was going down the Buddhist path, they said, Kate's finding her way. And now I'm on the far left path for the Catholic Church, and they're also very supportive of me. But it is in the Catholic Church where I feel like I can express myself, where I find my spiritual home, and I can blend what I've learned and take from Buddhism to a space where I feel like I have an authoritative voice and some experience to bring to the conversation. So that's just a little bit about my story. I started working for the Women's Ordination Conference in 2011, and a few months later, I went to Rome for the first time, which is a place I have lived now for 7 years. But I like to have a little merit badge that the first time I went to St. Peter's Square, I was with Father Roy Bourgeois. And for me, this was another awakening moment. There was a delegation of 18 of us from the US, mostly the US, but also Canada and England. And we brought a petition with 15,000 signatures calling for women's ordination. We screened the film Pink Smoke Over the Vatican. And this is, if you've seen the photos, we stopped the traffic walking down the Via della Conciliazione in Rome, holding banners. And as soon as we got to the kind of the perimeter of Vatican City, at the gates outside St. Peter's Square, we were stopped by police. And this was very, three of my colleagues were, Father Roy, Miriam, and my colleague Erin Hannah were taken away in a police car and detained for 3 hours. My memory is calling the Irish, the British, the American embassy to try to get them help. But I didn't quite realize until that moment how dangerous and how much of a lightning rod the words on our signs were, that the police ripped down and took away as evidence for a pending trial. And that was a very frightening moment to me, but it was a very unifying moment for me and the mission of the organization and for those that I was with. And what I remember most about this trip was a few days later. So Father Roy's status, he was suspended but not yet laicized. And he had finally got an appointment with the head of a dicastery in Rome. And so he went with Therese Katurbish and Bill Quigley, and they had a meeting. And some of us were in the square just waiting to hear how it went. And when he came out, you know, Father Roy, he was kind of shaking a little. And if you know him, he's not a shy person. And so Therese was sort of explaining what happened. And I just had this intense experience of injustice with this big institution kind of in the background, trying to remove the faculties and silence a person who was doing what to me was so clearly right and just. And actually, in preparing for the 45th anniversary for WALK, I was talking to Father Roy, and this was also a moment of awakening for him. And he said, even before this trip, he was a bit tentative in his advocacy, which, again, if you know Father Roy, that doesn't sound like him. But for both of us, we sort of had this awakening during this trip that what we were doing was not only was so important, and also so provocative to the Catholic Church, which in my kind of education I didn't fully grasp until I saw my colleagues being shoved into police cars. So this was just a really formative time for me, and this is even pre-Francis. So when we came back to the United States, it was a very incredible, fruitful time in the US for activism. So this is the LCWR Leadership Conference of Women Religious Nuns were being investigated, and the Women's Ordination Conference was organizing vigils across the country. So you can see me here making signs on the floor of the WALK office, stopping traffic again. That seems to be a theme. So this was a really important time for Catholics in the United States. It really brought out people into spaces and into activism that they hadn't done before. The media followed this very closely, and we ended up going to this LCWR meeting where the sisters, as you all probably remember, were discerning how to respond to this. And so the photo here with Teresa Kane and Joan Chittister and Erin and myself was a huge meeting. There was a lot of attention on that meeting. It's actually the place where I met my husband, Joshua, who is the Vatican correspondent for the National Catholic Reporter. So after meeting Joan and Teresa, I met Josh at that same meeting. So it was a very special time for the church and for me personally. And then pretty quickly after that, Pope Benedict resigned, and again, WALK rushed into action. And we came to Rome. There was, delays getting to Rome, and we raised pink smoke over the Vatican. And it was this sort of flashpoint of media attention. And you can see us here waiting in St. Peter's Square for the white smoke to appear. So again, this is just a real exciting time for the movement and for the church, because I think a lot of eyes are on not only what the sisters would do, but Pope Francis and this new energy that he brought. So that's a little bit about my history. And so I just want to kind of trace back to WALK's history. Again, we were founded in 1975. in a conference in Detroit where people came together, and I wish I could have been at that meeting, because the energy at that time for Catholic women in the U.S. was of great anticipation and excitement. Other women in other denominations were starting to become ordained, and it just felt like Roman Catholic women were on the cusp. And so I like to trace this just because I think our history is our strength. This is not a fly-by-night movement, and this change won't happen overnight, but we persist. And so we had several conferences in the first few years of our founding. And what I like to highlight about the 1980s, and this again is a very rudimentary sketch of history, but what seems almost incredible now is that WALK members were consultors with the U.S. Bishops' Conference on the Women's Pastoral Letter at the time. Many members of the Women's Ordination Conference were invited to give testimony on the floor of the U.S. Bishops' Conference about their vocations or their calls to priesthood. It was also the time, and from our early beginning, that we've had this kind of tension of do we wait for the church to the official church, institutional church, to make this change, or do we do this ourselves? Is ordination subordination? And so that question and that tension has been woven into our story from the very beginning. And in the 1980s, the emergence of women church groups began to form, and they sort of answered that part of the question. And then another group called Rapport in the United States was kind of working on the other question and meeting with bishops privately to be in dialogue with one another to share about their vocations. And so you can see these two approaches, and I like to think that WALK can hold both and all approaches to change, and both are necessary and equally valid. So even today, Rapport is a group that still exists, and women church convergence groups are still around, and we support and are members of both. So in the 1990s, it was very, as you can imagine, a really challenging time for our movement with the release of Ordinatio Sacerdotales. And it was a time when we were still having conferences, but I think some of the women who attended the first conference were starting to get tired of waiting. But we did see the emergence of the Young Feminist Network in the 90s. So we had a revival of young women trying to find their place in the church. The 2000s were a time of where the Women's Ordination Conference reviewed kind of itself. We call it our soul work. And WALK leadership challenged the organization to be truly anti-racist, and a side commission was formed to sort of inform the strategic plan of the organization. And I think that's really important, because it's something that we're still carrying forward today and trying to always make sure that we're not replicating oppressive structures in our own organization or in our messaging. During the 2000s, there was also the emergence of the first ordained women on the Danube, and that sort of created a huge conversation for the Women's Ordination Conference, because now we have women who are ordained. So are we pack it up? Are we done? And of course, that question, we're not done, but it did sort of challenge the organization to grow in new ways. And what developed from that was what we called the 3 ministries, which recognize and supports the women who take steps to ordination, but also walks with women called who are waiting, and works for those who are ready to be the rabble rousers. It was also a time in that decade that Pope Benedict was a very easy way to, he made a lot of people angry. And so it was a very easy thing to rally around. And so we saw a lot of great activism around that time, because it's so clearly against what we were doing. And so many people got involved in the movement then. And then in the 2011, that's kind of when I started in the organization. What I devised as how we focus our energies is into 4 categories. This slide is actually kind of a reference to the feminist foundations, the feminist theological foundations of our movement. And this was at the very first conference that we had in 1975, where Dr. Margaret Farley called for the moral imperative of the ordination of women. And I feel like this question is echoed today. So she addresses the reluctance of many women in the church to allow for the ordination of women to the priesthood to become the central and overall questioning of roles for ministries. But she says that it should be central to any considerations of roles for women in the church. And actually the office of priesthood is a particularly potent focus for addressing the sources of sexism in Christian thought. And for our 45th anniversary, Margaret Farley spoke on our virtual gala and said she stands by nearly every word of this presentation at our first conference. So again, this is just our feminist theology sort of runs through the decades of walks. Feminist theology and thought leadership sort of runs through the backbone of the Women's Ordination Conference. So today we divide our work into sort of 4 categories. And so we still kind of have the 3 ministries, which many people are very familiar with, but how I like to describe the work that we do is it's theological, prophetic, dialogical, and visible. So for theological, this is kind of honoring our tradition of feminist theology and advancing intersectional theological work on the imperative of women's ordination, and sort of countering the anti-women's ordination arguments through forms of dialogue, publications, and empowerment. This is still very important to us. I think many theologians sort of think this question is over, but in our commitment to being intersectional and dismantling oppressive systems in all regions and all kind of thought, this is still a very important part of our work. The prophetic part is walking with those women who are called to ordination and those who answer their calls to ordained ministries. So for me, those that model a renewed priesthood and meet the needs of the people of God is the most powerful witness we have for the ordination of women. I think it's when you hear a woman's authentic call and the ways that she is modeling renewed ministry and renewed priesthood in the world, that's the best argument we can have, because we know that God calls women to be priests. And so for me, this is where I get so much of my energy from, and am spiritually fed by the ministries of those courageous women who answer their calls. So while Walk continues to challenge the institutional church, we also celebrate and really embrace those women who take steps to live their call. And that is, I think, honestly, a way that the movement can continue, because these women are feeding our movement spiritually. So I know that you had Kathy at one of your conversations, so you know what I'm talking about. But for me, this is really something that's so potent to me. I'm not called to priesthood. I'm called to make decisions and be in charge. But I know so many women who are pained, and generations of women who have been turned away. I'm sure you do as well. And so those women this is a very challenging thing to do in some ways, but it's so natural because it's answering their call from God. But for me, this prophetic piece is a very powerful witness for our work. The third area is this dialogical area. So while it seems impossible that we can dialogue about this issue, and that the church continues to say that this question is closed, the door is closed, there's nothing more to say, we continue our lobbying efforts to do this. And we try to do it in different ways. And that's part of the visible activism piece here, is that but we are able to still dialogue with the hierarchy. Actually, recently we've been able to dialogue with more bishops in the US than ever before. So for me, this is a very important piece, that we know this change will begin with dialogue, and we're hearing it more and more from the institution and from bishops around the world. And so, we are just continuing to amplify those calls for conversation. And then the visible piece is my favorite. This is the Ministry of Irritation and is really the heartbeat of our work to develop creative, engaging, and effective ways to witness for women's ordination. So this is where I feel like I have my best strengths, as I'm able to work with our team to develop really beautiful and effective and visible campaigns to raise the issue in new ways. So for a campaign that's been going for many, many decades, it's always fun to sort of think of new ways to catch the media's attention, which is something that WALK realized in the 70s as a very effective way to raise our mission. But for me, this is kind of where I love the work that we do. I love that we're radical. I love that we're activists. And I love that we're able to train and support local activists on the ground, because as I said before, we know that change will come from the grassroots. So here is just a few photos that I wanted to share from some of our campaigns to show that this is really where WALK shines. So this is actually a photo from in the left corner, the new priestly ministry. That's a photo from our 1978 conference. Here's a photo of Catholic Votes for Catholic Women just a couple years ago. When Pope Benedict came to the United States, the WALK team hired a truck with a billboard to follow him around the city of Washington. Here's my friend Margaret, who's a former board member, who has a makeshift drum here that Sisters Are the Heartbeat of the Church, and that was part of a big action in support of the sisters. Here is His Eminence Cardinal Cartone, who we were recently in dialogue with in a video trying to expose the paper-thin arguments against women's ordination. And ironically, after we released this video is when we started to hear from some hierarchs who wanted to be in dialogue with us. So we joked that all we needed was a very elaborate parody campaign. And then we were approached by several bishops to have conversations. So Cardinal Cartone is a fun cartoon character. Again, our pink smoke over the Vatican witnesses. This is a group in New Orleans witnessing. Here's a photo in the upper right where when the Women's Deacon Commission just started, we had a campaign of people writing love letters for women's equality. And I found that the best way to approach the Vatican offices is by surprise. Also, it helps if you have flowers. So I pretended that I had a delivery for the Cardinal, and I was able to give him our letter and these Valentines for equality. So these are just a few examples of creative ways that we raise our cause and amplify our mission. So in encompassing all of those things, I wanted to share just a few things that I think really make our movement special. And these are not, these are maybe things that you don't always hear about in the news or in the media, but things that I think really strengthen the work that we do. So first, I guess after hearing about some of our campaigns, is that we are very effective with social and new media. So we're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We have weekly blog posts and videos. We're not yet on TikTok, but I think we will be soon. So this is just a new way to reach people and younger and younger people who are joining us through social media. We also are an organization in consultative status with the United Nations. So this is a development that happened in 2019. So we regularly send written statements to high-level meetings to offer parallel events at the Commission on the Status of Women meetings. And we see this as a really potent space to amplify the voice of Catholic feminists, because the Holy See is so powerful at these meetings and has sort of oversized influence as a non-member permanent observer of the United Nations. Our voice is very important to sort of counter that voice as to say that they don't speak for all Catholics. I have another slide about our work at the United Nations, but I think that's a real strength of ours. And we have 2 representatives in New York who regularly go to meetings, now on Zoom, and draft statements on our behalf. We'll be having 3 meetings at the Commission on the Status of Women gatherings in March this year to continue to amplify our message. We also are Catholics. So a lot of our advocacy, in addition to our advocacy, we also empower feminist ministers. We offer inclusive and feminist prayer and liturgical resources. We have an inclusive Catholic lectionary. We recently published a book called Liberating Liturgies 2.0. And this is a way that we sort of model not only a renewed priesthood, but just feminist ministries to the world. So we often have prayer gatherings in collaboration with Women's Ordination worldwide. And I think it's a real strength of our movement. And again, I'll just mention that we strive to be intersectional in our work in order to be relevant and effective and truly transformative. We cannot replicate systems of oppression. Here's just a quick slide about our work at the United Nations. Here is a meeting a few years ago, and this is a witness that we had outside of the Holy See Embassy in New York, where we were holding life rafts to say that the Holy See is sinking women's rights. So it's just a kind of a clever witness that we had there. So this is kind of the mission or the refrain that we bring to the United Nations, that because the Catholic Church is a worldwide organization enjoying respect and authority beyond religious parameters, and yet neither models nor encourages gender equity, it has undue influence in the achievement of gender justice in the world. And unfortunately, the Catholic Church often partners with more conservative governments and in effect gives sort of cover to those governments and agencies that try to impede the full inclusion of women in decision-making. These are just a few more points here. We have a very strong young feminist network. We have about 350 people from age 20, actually like 18 to 42 or so in our Facebook group. And this is a really vibrant space for people to come together and sort of question their journey, look for jobs within the church, look for advice, pray together. And this is a network that started in the 90s, as you saw in our timeline, but actually kind of went on hiatus, but we've seen a real resurgence of young people trying to navigate the church as feminists and sort of modern young people in the world. And, you know, just this last week, I got emails from 3 high school students who found the Young Feminist Network and wanted to know more about the Women's Ordination Conference. So it's a good sort of entry point for young people who are trying to find their authentic self in the church and maybe struggling in their local parish or on their Zoom mass. I mentioned our local leaders network. This is our grassroots arm where we're able to help coordinate and empower people on the ground to take steps to advocate, to speak to their bishop, to organize a rally. You know, when we lifted pink smoke over the Vatican, 12 cities in the United States also had pink smoke vigils. So that's the result of a young local leaders network. We also have a Spanish language program with 2 dedicated staff members called Escuchando a las Mujeres, which addresses the growing, addresses and coordinates and networks with the growing Spanish-speaking population of Catholics in the United States. So this started as a listening session project, and we've decided to continue it through social media and online gatherings, and really we're working in the next year to mainstream the work of our this program into the work of the Women's Ordination Conference and offer more of our resources in Spanish. So this is a really exciting program and quite new for us. And then lastly, and here's the phone booth that Pat referenced in the beginning. I think that WOC is uniquely positioned with staff in the US and in Rome so that we can better deepen our international networks and are able to organize around Vatican meetings and respond to media requests quickly. So this, I think, was about a week after I moved to Rome. I was delivering another petition here and talking to the Swiss guards to try to figure out how to get in. So I've learned a lot since then, and I think it really does strengthen our movement, because sometimes there is a stereotype about the women's ordination movement, that it's just an American movement. And by being able to sort of understand a more global perspective and network with other organizations globally, and also just better understand the Roman part of the Roman Catholic Church has not only strengthened our activism, but it kind of dispels the myth that this is an exclusively an issue within the United States. And so here, so I'm gonna kind of, we're almost done, I think. These are some of the questions that I get quite often, and maybe you're thinking them yourself. And they're very valid questions. And I think this is a way to I just wanted to raise them because I know that, the Vatican has their arguments against women's ordination, but they're very unconvincing. And I think the more challenging arguments about women's ordination come from, very thoughtful Catholics like yourselves who are thinking about this, who are tired or have been harmed by the church or are ready to walk away. And so these are some of the comments that I often receive about our movement. And, after being so kind of exposed in the media yesterday, I'm already starting to receive a lot of hate mail about our mission. And so some of these come from that, but these are very common questions. So one of them is that priesthood is a failed system. So why not put ordination aside and advocate for equality? So this is a common question that I receive, and something that I think, I just want to preference that my opinion is based on my experience and my role as an advocate for the organization, and something that I actually really struggle with as a representative from an organization is that I also it's hard to be vulnerable in public because it can be a challenge to represent a mission, but also have an interior faith that, maybe doesn't always quite align with the movement that you're meant to represent. So I want to say that, when I answer these questions, I'm thinking about them as strategists who's working towards equality for women in the church, and sort of uncompromisingly holding women's ordination as part of the unlocking of equality. So I think many of us would agree that priesthood has failed as we know it in the institutional church. And we've seen those failures harm so many people and communities. And that's based on exclusion, but also clericalism, unchecked power, the demonization of women and LGBT people. But I think the idea that we should put ordination aside to do other things, or that we could strive towards equality while not also engaging in the ordination question is an incomplete way to approach the work, and an incomplete way to approach equality. I think the best argument that I have for this putting ordination aside, which I think is so dangerous, is that we know that women are called to priesthood. And so when you put that question aside and say, let's do this work without talking about women's ordination, it can harm and it denies the experience of women who are called to priesthood. I also think that equality would be quite limited until women have full equality in the church, which at this stage, and I think in the foreseeable future, the sacrament of ordination will still be part of our tradition. I think there's, opportunities for lay ministry, and those should obviously grow. But I think by putting ordination aside, you can run the risk of aligning yourself with the Vatican argument that this is not a topic that you shouldn't talk about. And so for me, it offers a lot of integrity to be able to hold up this cause, which is such a lightning rod and is so taboo for a reason, because it is this linchpin of power. So that's one answer, and I'd love to talk to all of you more about this. And maybe you don't think these things at all, but these are some of the common questions that I hear. So another one on the right, and I love this photo, and you can see Miriam here from WOW, is that churches are empty, the institution has no credibility. Why not walk away and build something better? And you and I we all know that people do this, and we have home masses and church communities and faith communities, and I think that's so important. But I think we can't lose sight of the institution that still perpetuates harm around the world. So it's a luxury to be able to opt out of Catholic medicine, Catholic hospitals, Catholic schools, and Catholic communities where the bishop has so much power. So even though churches may be empty where you are, they're not empty everywhere. And although it's easy for a Westerner to say that the institution has no credibility, but in some communities around the world, the church does. And you can see that in action at the United Nations. So while I and many have not just walked, I would say, to change this question, I would say not walk away, but to walk in a parallel way, or do both. I think there's a lot of value in building your own community, but for me, there's a part of me that I couldn't leave in my faith by walking away. And I think if Catholics aren't the ones to work for justice in their church, who will? Here's a photo from the witness in 2018, where I was grabbed by the police for our action outside the Synod Hall. So I hear this a lot, even from people who went to the first Women's Ordination Conference. You've been at this for 45 years. Nothing's changed. Why don't you give up? And for me, I think that's fair, and I think people can walk away, and that's very valid. But I'm not ready to walk away. And I do believe that things have changed. And I know I've worked for the organization for only 10 years, and in Catholic time warp, that is very little. So I also think that our 45 years is our strength, that this is a question that has not been answered in the church, and it demands a response. The gospel demands a response of equality. And so for me, I still have energy and I still have hope. And I really do believe that although these incremental steps feel very pathetic, but each step along a journey towards equality is important. And then this last piece here is, again, this is the same action here. You can see the bishops walking into the Synod Hall here. Often people say you're too radical, and this goes along with the put ordination aside question. Why don't you try to work within the system and take small steps? And to this I say, more power to you. I believe let 1,000 flowers bloom in the activism and the movement for women's equality in the church. And I don't think that one should prohibit the other. I think some people are ready to be radical, and that's necessary. And then there are others who can do the work within and maneuver in their own way. And I think both are valid and both are necessary for total transformation of an institution. So yes, I believe that the Women's Ordination Conference is radical, and it's important to be that way. And not everyone has to shout outside of the Synod Hall to make a difference. I believe that every part of this journey is important, and every person has a part to play. So I just included a few quotes here that I really love. And this photo is from a recent action on July 22nd, the feast day of Mary Magdalene. We had some activists around the US put signs around churches as a sort of socially distant action, and they zip tied the doors closed with an ordained women sign, and this is in Philadelphia. So this quote from Jamie Manson, who is an advisor to the Women's Ordination Conference, is one of the really powerful sort of touchstones that I come back to about this work, that I think is really important because it focuses on the teaching around women's bodies and complementarity that is so entwined with the prohibition of women from ordination, that I think is central to dismantling and eventually reaching equality. So how can women ever achieve true empowerment when their religious leaders declare that it is God's plan that women are not entitled to equal religious or spiritual authority? How will women ever see true equality when the hierarchy teaches that even God believes that a woman's body is inadequate and invalid when it comes to possessing certain forms of power? And then these are just a few other quotes that I love from some of our advisors. And there's no doubt equality is the vision for our time, and this is our moment. And this is Sister Teresa Kane, who addressed Pope John Paul II when he came to the United States and asked for the opening of all ministries for women in the church in 1979. This is from Joan Chittister, who we had at an event in 2019. Do not separate the Women's Ordination Conference and its questions from the questions of women everywhere. And this is, I think, echoes the intersectional and kind of the holistic equality that we need to achieve in our work. And then Anthony Padovano is one of our advisors as well. No single organization witnesses to the urgency and importance of women's full equality than the Women's Ordination Conference. So that's the last slide that I have, and I've just included our website, which has a lot of the resources and more of the videos and records of the campaigns that we've had in the past. We're on social media at Ordain Women, and this is my email address if you want to reach me there. So thank you all very much, and I hope you could see the slides okay. I couldn't see my notes, so I was going blind here, but hopefully that was okay.